Hi there, my name's James Kelly and welcome back to Scott Goes Pop and let joy be unbounded because yeah, it's that time of the year again. It's time for the Scotland and Union propaganda poll run by Survation when Survation, for reasons only known to themselves, dispense with their usual high-minded practices about neutral and balanced question wording and just ask a series of propaganda questions on behalf of Scotland and Union. Heaven only knows why they do it. Maybe Scotland and Union pay a special premium or something. But anyway, it is an extraordinary spectacle. I think it happens about once or twice a year. So we, as usual, have the flagship question, which purports to be an independence question, but isn't. And it's just an attempt to get a sort of substitute independence question that will somehow make it look like independence is less popular than that actually is. The question asked is something like, should Scotland remain in the United Kingdom or leave the United Kingdom? It's attempting to mimic the European Union referendum question from 2016, and that's to make that somehow seem reasonable to people, and it always produces a bigger remain in inverted commas vote than the actual no vote in conventional independence polling. And this time it's produced a remain vote of 60% and a leave vote of 40%, which is actually pretty okay because the previous poll in the series had remain on 59% and leaving 41%. So that suggests a stable, static trend. And a stable, static trend is perhaps all we would need, because if Ipsos are right and if Find Out Now are right, then yes are actually ahead in conventional polling. So if that remains stable, then that remains the case. Yes remained ahead. Now, to be clear, the headline figures in their Survation poll, which implied that 60% of people with Don't Knows Excluded are opposed to independence, is completely meaningless because, for the simple reason that a question asking should Scotland remain in the United Kingdom or leave the United Kingdom would never be approved by the Electoral Commission as an acceptable question in an independence referendum. And the reason is because it's not clear enough. That's one of the things the Electoral Commission look for in a referendum question for any referendum is clarity and indeed accuracy of whether the question actually tallies up with what is really being asked about. And why is it not clear enough? Well, as you might remember, about a month ago, I was on holiday in the Channel Islands, and that's the Channel Islands are actually one of the examples I've always used to explain why this question doesn't work, because the bailiwick of Guernsey and the bailiwick of Jersey are not part of the United Kingdom. They are outside the United Kingdom, but they are not independent countries either. They are self-governing British dependencies. The same is true of the Isle of Man. The same is true of the overseas dependencies. So if you're asking whether Scotland should leave the United Kingdom, the question that is not answered by that is leave to do what? Are you going to leave to become an independent country, or are you going to leave to become a self-governing dependency, or are you going to leave to become part of another state, as for example, if Northern Ireland left the United Kingdom, it's more likely to join a united Ireland rather than to become independent. So there are actually three destinations of leaving the United Kingdom, and unless you specify that, it's not a clear enough question. So that would never be approved. A question about Scottish independence would always ask about independence. I suppose in theory you could say, should Scotland leave the United Kingdom to become an independent country? But then the question would be, why are you asking that rather than the much simpler question, should Scotland become an independent country or should Scotland be an independent country, which is shorter and conveys all the necessary information. So you would always come back to something very similar to the 2014 question. So Scotland and Union can dream their dreams, but they're not going to get their desired propaganda question if there is another referendum. So no, the 60-40 result is meaningless, except in the sense that it tells us that the trend is flat, which is the only important thing about the so-called independence question in this poll. But of more interest are the voting intention questions for Westminster and for the Scottish Parliament, because those are standard questions and they haven't been influenced by the propaganda purpose of the poll, and you can tell that from the results, which are actually pretty good for the SNP. On the Westminster question, the SNP are on 35% of the vote, which is up 3 on the last poll, which was in May. So that is completely the opposite trend to the one we saw from Find Out Now earlier this week, which suggested that the SNP were down a few points since the spring. In joint second place are Reform UK on 19%, but that's down too. Again, the opposite trend from what we saw from Find Out Now. Also in joint second place are the Labour Party on 19%. In third place, the Conservatives on 12%. They are up 1. The Liberal Democrats are on 8%, which is down 3. Are things going a little bit wrong for the Liberal Democrats? We kind of saw a little bit of that from Find Out Now as well. The Greens are on 4%, which is down 1, and Alba are on 1%, which is down 1. But on the Scottish Parliament results, which of course are the most important because it's the Scottish Parliament election that is imminent, the results are even better for the SNP. On the constituency ballot, the SNP are on 37% of the vote, which is up 4. Labour are on 20%, which is up 1, denying Reform UK, clear second place. Reform UK are in third on 18%, which is down 1. The Conservatives are unchanged on 11%. The Liberal Democrats are on 7%, which is down 4. Very interesting. The Greens are unchanged on 5%, and Alba are unchanged on a very lowly 1%. The list ballots, the SNP have recovered a bit to 31%, that's up 2. Again, Labour in second place, not Reform, 18% unchanged for Labour. Reform are down 4 points to 16% of the vote. The Conservatives in fourth place on 13%, that is up 1. Liberal Democrats, strangely enough, have improved on the list. They're on 11%, which is up 1. The Greens are on 8%, which is down 1. Alba are on 2%, which is down 1. Now, one thing I don't like about this is that there was an MSP from the SNP who was talking up the Ballot Box Scotland seats projection from this poll, which may flatter the SNP, I don't know, but it does have the SNP short of an overall majority, which is the important point. The SNP are on 63 seats in the Ballot Box Scotland projection, which is obviously 2 seats short of the target for an overall majority. Labour in second place on 19. Reform UK are on 16. The Liberal Democrats are on 13. Conservatives on 12 and the Greens on 6. So that is an overall majority for the pro-independence parties in combination with the SNP falling short of an overall majority on their own, which is the same pattern we saw in the Find Out Now poll. And I don't like this idea that we're going to constantly get SNP, MSPs or MPs hyping up. Oh, we are so close to an overall majority. Oh, we just need another push because that seems intuitively reasonable to people. If you say we're on 63 seats, why couldn't we get to 65? Well, first of all, I very much doubt these figures would actually translate into 63 seats. But the point is to get to 65, you're going to have to do that with constituency seats. It's not like you can make up the difference with list seats, because if you're on 63 seats, you've maxed out anything you can get to with a relatively low percentage on the list. So that shortfall has to be made up with constituency seats. So you have to explain what those constituency seats are and how on earth you're going to win them, because some of them are going to be really tough and some of them are going to be frankly impossible. And I do not see how the SNP can get to 65 seats, no matter how close some of these polls make it look like they are to that target. The reason they appear to be getting close is because of the Reform surge. There's a kind of split that if you pump it into an electoral model, a prediction model, the SNP are doing particularly well in constituencies and winning more seats in the constituencies than they would normally be able to win on that kind of share of the vote. But I still do not see how they get to 65. So the question we should really be asking ourselves is the one I asked about the Find Out Now poll, which is what happens if the SNP do not get this so-called extra little push, which in reality would be no such thing, do not get to the overall majority. But there is an overall majority of pro-independence parties. That's by far more likely than the SNP winning an overall majority on their own. Have you then cooked your own goose by saying that that is not good enough? During the campaign, you're saying, oh, a pro-independence majority isn't good enough. We need a single party SNP majority. You get the pro-independence majority, you don't get the SNP overall majority. Have you effectively destroyed your chances of independence by what you've said during the campaign? And shouldn't you, as we have this window of opportunity to avoid making that mistake in the first place, shouldn't we grab that window of opportunity with both hands and actually amend the John Swinney plan at conference and just avoid setting this desperately dangerous precedent of saying you need an SNP overall majority, which is not achievable in the current circumstances and may never be realistically achievable. The 2011 election was freakish. There is no reason to think that is ever going to be repeated. We could go decades without any party ever winning a single party overall majority ever again. So this poll, remarkably, although it was intended as a propaganda poll, it's actually brought some really good news, but also dangerous news if the sort of the propagandists for the John Swinney plan are using the apparent closeness of the SNP to an overall majority to sell this false prospectus of the John Swinney plan, the idea that you can actually get an overall SNP majority and use that to win in a referendum. Of course, the other problem with the plan is that even if you did achieve the impossible and get the overall majority, there is no reason to think the UK government would be impressed by that or would suddenly say, oh yeah, let's have a referendum. The John Swinney plan says that an SNP overall majority is the only uncontested route to a referendum. Well, why is it uncontested when the UK government contest it and say they would not agree to a referendum in any circumstances? You can't say something is uncontested when it is directly contested. There's also a new Ipsos poll out, a full-scale Scottish poll from Ipsos, but it doesn't contain voting intention numbers, or if it does, those have not been released yet. It contains things like favourability ratings for political parties and leaders. I'll maybe deal with that in another video if I have the time. But that's it for now. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you later.